Hey UCW fans, Axel here, coming at you with another blog for this week. This week I'm going to be talking about a very big news topic that some of you, if not all of you, have heard by now. It was announced last week that the International Olympic Committee, or the IOC, has taken wrestling off of the Olympics, the Summer Olympics, for the 2020 Games. Now, it hasn't been decided yet where the 2020 Games will be held, but recently they've been talking about figuring out what their 25 core sports are, and unfortunately wrestling was shortlisted. What does that mean? Well, wrestling now has to compete with 7 other sports to get onto the program for the 2020 Games. Now, ever since 2004, the 2004 Games, the IOC has said that there is only going to be 28 sports in each Olympic Games. Now, in the last Olympic Games in London, there were only 26 sports. This was as a result of the committee not being able to come to a decision of what sports to add to the list. One of the sports that was dropped from the list was baseball and softball. As you saw, they weren't there in the past Olympics. Now, the other sports that wrestling is going to be competing against for a spot on the Olympic Games. Now remember, there's only 3 spots left. The other sports that wrestling has to compete with is wushu, karate, baseball and softball, roller sports, wakeboarding, squash, and sports climbing. Now, I'm no martial arts expert. I've heard of wushu, but I don't really know exactly what it's about. I've done karate in the past. It's a good sport. I'd actually love to see karate on the Olympic Games list. Baseball and softball, I suck at them, so personally I don't watch them, so I personally wouldn't enjoy watching them. Roller sports, I can't see this being a very popular sport for the games, and we'll come to this later. Wakeboarding, again, I don't see this as a very popular sport among countries. Squash, that could be interesting. Sports climbing, I honestly don't know what they mean by this, other than the only thing in my head that I can think of is rock climbing, rappelling, stuff like that. Alright, so one of the criteria, there's about 31 criteria I think that the IOC has to look at when considering a sport for the Olympics. One of the biggest criteria is universality. And by that, how many countries actually participate or would participate in this sport? Now, if you look at the numbers, and I've got them written down right here, wrestling was on a short list with at least 4 other sports that were in danger of being cut, which was the modern pentathlon, field hockey, canoeing, and taekwondo. Now, I've done a little research and looked at how many countries participated in each sport in the last Olympics. Taekwondo had 63 countries participating in the sport. Canoeing had 53 countries. Hockey, they only had 15 countries on the actual Olympics itself, but field hockey has a qualifying tournament that's done throughout the world. They narrow it down to 12 teams on both the men's and the women's side to compete in the actual Olympic Games. So I couldn't figure out how many countries also took place or also participated in the qualifying round. So for now, I just have to say that there were 15 countries representing field hockey at the Olympics themselves. Modern pentathlon, 26 countries. And wrestling, 71 countries. 71. Now, everyone thought modern pentathlon was going to be cut, and for good reason. There's not a lot of countries participating in this sport. Here's what I don't get. How can the IOC cut wrestling when there are 71 countries participating in wrestling and only 26 participating in modern pentathlon. If you go by that standard alone, universality, modern pentathlon should have been cut. And then here's where the conspiracy comes in. The head chair for the modern pentathlon committee is also on the IOC board. So, conspiracy theorists, let your thoughts and your imagination go wild. And all the other sports are fairly well represented on the IOC board as well. This is where wrestling is lacking. Wrestling, unfortunately, now has to kind of play by the rules of the IOC. In the past, they've never really done any campaigning for the sport. It's always been assumed that because wrestling is a tradition, I mean, wrestling's been around since the very first modern games in 1896, and it's been around since the ancient games in Greece. So, unfortunately, wrestling now is going to have to elect some officials to get onto the IOC board and make their voices heard. I mean, if you look at it, wrestling doesn't really have a Super Bowl or a World Series or some sort of a grand finale for the season to showcase wrestlers. The Olympics pretty much is that definition. It's that standard that every wrestler works towards. If you take that away, I feel that they could be seriously damaging the sport. I mean, we go back to the discussion about universality. There's over 177 countries with some form of wrestling or participation in Greco-Roman freestyle styles of wrestling throughout the world. To take the Olympics away, I feel that that would take away the popularity of the sport, and it would eventually hurt it, and we would see declines in wrestling. So, I mean, here in the U.S., there's a lot of high schools and colleges that have wrestling, and after college and high school, there's really nothing to look forward to. There's really no professional organization of wrestling except for really the Olympics. I mean, I'd like to see something like that changed, but until that does happen, the Olympics are really the only thing that wrestlers beyond high school and college have to look forward to. So, what can we do? What can we do? What can typical, average Joe like myself and you do? Well, right now there are 2 petitions that I know of. I've already signed them, and I think you should too. I'll be posting them on the website and our other links section of the webpage, where you can click, go, sign your name, and sign the petition. The 2 websites are at change.org, right here on the screen, and the other website is through whitehouse.gov. I encourage you all to go to both of these petitions, sign your name, and support wrestling, and get the IOC to realize what a huge mistake they've made. I mean, I don't know about you, but I grew up watching the Olympics as a kid, and wrestling was always one of my favorite sports to watch. And just looking from the past Olympics, I mean, you watch the crowds. I mean, there were sellout crowds at the Olympics. I don't see how the Olympics can ignore that. It's such a huge draw. It basically embodies what the Olympics are all about. So, on that note, sign the petitions, support wrestling, and share the links on your Facebook pages, your Twitter accounts, your friends, your family. Get anybody you know who likes wrestling or just supports wrestling to get out and sign these petitions and make your voice heard. So, on that note, have a good week, keep buying our videos, and I'll see you next week for a new blog. Oh, and always, go USA!